Hello. So this is going to be about my podcast for APUS history. This is for pages 4 to 11. And we will also be discussing. So this is a combination of the stuff I read from American Pageant and a little bit of basically like my own little bit of like research I did because I Googled some of the topics for my notes that I created. So yeah, we're just going to start off. All right, so let's talk about the shaping of North America. That's one of the main points. So, how did North America come together? So, a long time ago, there was the supercontinent known as Pangea, during the Mesozoic era. So, during this time, eventually, continents split apart, and the uplift of the Rocky Mountains, creation of the Great Basin, and the all the glaciation events during the Pleistocene epoch created basically critically shaped terrain, river systems, and ecological zones, especially the Great Lakes. Those were actually created by the fact that the glaciers were there. They basically created those Great Lakes by causing depressions in the land. And the last glacial maximum was roughly 20,000 years ago. And as the glacials receded, they left behind lakes and various biomes, whatever, whatever. So let's talk about the peopling the Americas. So, okay, so where did these people in Americas come from? So the primary evidence says they were probably from Asia, and the traditional theory is the Bering Sea Strait or the Bering Land Bridge, Beringia, whatever you like to call it, managed to migrate across the Bering Sea Strait, upon which the Bering Sea Strait actually broke. So they were effectively couldn't go back. And so genetic studies basically say there's probably a single major founding population with some little bit of a mixture from ancient Siberian and East Asian groups. And it's just there's over 300 language families, which suggests that since as these groups spread apart, there's a lot of divergence in their cultures, right? So they quickly managed to diverge. So, okay, right? So we've gone through Americans have come. Who were the earliest Americans? So agriculture. So there's originally, obviously, there were hunter gathering, but about 2000 BCE, there was a shift from agriculture to corn growing, shift from hunter gathering to agriculture, so especially corn growing. So that was a lot of this side and the sophistication. And some of the examples of things were Incas and Peru, Mayans and Aztecs, and they were very, very sophisticated with their agricultural practices. Uh, it's also cultivated what's maize, which is known as Indian corn, and it could feed a bunch of populations, right? And this is what led to allowed their population to grow, the discovery of maize. But they didn't have draft animals like large animals like cows, horses. But what they did is they used technology such as the wheel to innovate and still manage to be able to make great types of agriculture. So Olmec, I talked about the Mayas, Zapotec, and Tijuan. North America, there was a lot of points in which they were trading cultures and often confederations. So the indirect discovery of the New World. So they say the first discovery was the Norse. The Norse expeditions in about 1000 Common Era, and this was read by Leif Erikson. So they established what is known as Vinland, in Newfoundland, and they say there's like Viking ruins there. But eventually these settlers had left because there's fighting from indigenous people. There wasn't particularly many resources, and there wasn't much support from their governments. Okay, so not much support, but Christian crusaders are some of the people who managed to reconnect Europe with Middle Eastern goods, right? So this made people basically want, okay, we want these Middle Eastern goods, but we don't want to I mean, Middle Eastern Asian goods, but we don't want to go through these Silk Road, these traditional travel routes. So Marco Polo's travels popularized the notion of the East as a land of immense wealth, riches, silk, and this wasn't 100% true. It was distorted, but the European maps lacked the Americas, but they hinted at Western waters. So eventually, there was Portuguese in 1450 invented the caravel. The astrolabe and the magnetic compass were invented by Chinese, and the port land charts, that was a better cartography by the Portuguese, and this enabled efficient open ocean navigation. So, and with the discovery of the sub-Saharan Africa, the Europeans also wanted new sort of areas to colonize to be able to efficiently generate resources. So in 1492, all they know about is Europe, Africa, and Asia, and England. and then in India, Arabia, Persia, and eventually in Africa, they were the foundations of modern Portuguese thing. But in 1492, it was tried there. But Prince Henry the Navigator, Portugal decided to invest in marine exploration down the western African coast, right? Because they want to circumvent Muslim covered the trans-Saharan routes and old roads. They want to circumvent it to easily get to Asia. And slavery existed within African societies already. Africans tended to enslave each other, but Europeans did it on a much larger level, and they commodified these people, and they brought it to another whole different level. If I speak colloquially, so New World beginning. So what happened to the New World? This refers to the convergence of the New World ecosystems with economies and populations. This is known as the Columbian Exchange. So Columbus comes on the New World and sets the stage for colonization. And the Europeans enter Africa is where we stop here. So just sorry, I started hinting a little bit because I went to page 13, started explaining that, but I think this is sort of the main parts of it. I don't need to talk about guns, germs, and steel, but the Americas were really important because the peopling of the Americas itself is very, very interesting. So an interesting thing from the book is that there's a map from 1546 by Sebastian Munster, which which wanted to make sense of the New World. And you can see there's a lot of land, and it was just so unimaginable. They tried to call it a new world, not a new continent, not a new place, a new world. And eventually they realized the consequences of this discovery. Um, and of course, they had really bad inaccuracies like Japan. But they say that about this migration, the selected in Paleo Indian sites have been found moving from the Bering Sea Strait. And as age goes on, people move south because eventually the winter started coming back in. So the people moved south to warmer lands where they could farm and they could have a better life.